Well, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call to order the regular planning board meeting for November 9th, 2021. I'm going to take a roll call vote. Theo Knoll.
Here.
Jim Hogan.
Here.
Megan Menasali.
Here.
Bill Spalding.
Here.
All right. First item number 2 is approval of minutes from October 26th. Everyone got a copy of the minutes? Any comments, questions, revisions on those? All right. Do I hear a motion to accept?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote to approve the minutes of October 26th, 2021. Jim Hogan,
Yes.
Bill Spalding,
Yes.
Megan Menasali,
Yes.
and Theo Knoll.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Item number 3, discussion questions for potential future lake business overlay district or revision of the of properties surrounding the lake. So Theo, do you want to head this up since you initiated these, you and Jim initiated the comments and questions?
Oh, sure. Happy to. And Susan and I talked about it, that I might share my screen at a certain point and I could track changes to it if that was useful. But just as a reminder, the zoning around the lake, public access, scenic views have been a topic of our attention during the spring and summer. We had 2 open public forums at the end of August, the 24th and September 14th. And all of that discussion, I think we all acknowledge, did not produce as much concrete input as we were hoping for to give us some building point to start with. And so we left those meetings with the desire to consider some draft discussion questions that at a future public forum would prompt more concrete discussion from area businesses, residents, other stakeholders. And so that's what I drafted. Jim separately reviewed and made some edits to, and that's what we're bringing to the board for discussion. And again, it's not tonight, we're not talking specifics about lake zoning, or we're not making purposeful decisions or deliberations around that. It really is editing the language of these questions so that we can frame the approach and at a future discussion have these to use towards some future, a more productive discussion. So how has everybody seen them? How do we want to proceed?
I know I've received them. Has everyone else received a copy?
I have. Yes, I have.
All right.
Should I share my screen?
Yeah, why don't you share your screen? That way everyone can see what we have.
So this top section, we really was sort of introduction and framing, trying to capture our prior discussions, and again, not meant to preclude or suggest that we've made any decisions one way or the other. So I don't know if folks have edits to this or suggestions, whether or not we keep them or remove them when we have a future discussion.
I think one of the big things when I reviewed this and I provided a couple of my comments is kind of setting some of the I think when we're talking about the feedback we have heard, we have heard that the public, does cherish lake and has a strong feeling that it needs to be protected and the scenic vistas and such. And there's language associated with that in this introduction. I think part of the second part of this paragraph, or the bottom of the page currently that is in here, when we had the public forum, we didn't really hear a lot of concrete feedback as it relates to specifics from the public as it relates to what types of items they would or would not be interested in. And so I think one of the things that Theo and I, when we discussed in person along this, is trying to set what are some of the things that we could consider, specifically as it relates to the restrictions that are being considered or potential incentives. Again, not saying that any of these are proposals or would necessarily be incorporated, but just things that would be advantageous to bring the public, as if we're creating a lake overlay district, these are the types of things that could be included in them. And so I think it makes a lot of sense, if we're going to have another public forum and engage with the public, to talk about what are some of the things that we could potentially be including as incentives or restrictions, and have that be the jumping off point of saying, these are the types of things that, again, we're not necessarily considering one way or the other, but they're the types of things that we could, and to really understand if the public has, concrete feedback of whether or not these types of things would be advantageous or disadvantageous as it relates to this lake overlay district. I think it's really important to be able to give people an idea of the types of things we're talking about, so we're not getting into the gut reaction of business owners saying, please don't change anything, we like certainty, and the public saying, please don't change anything because we don't want you to, we want you to freeze exactly what's on the lake right now. And so I think it's important for us to really talk about, the feedback we have gotten to date, and then to talk about the types of things that could be included with the overlay district, not necessarily saying that any of them are potentials. And that's why it's just maximum widths of buildings, setbacks from the lake, access to the lake for the public, maximum height, incentives, eliminating special permit requirements, or, add additional allowable uses, or density preferred uses. Those are very high level. And I think that it would be an opportunity for people to be able to say, hey, I think that I, would advocate for X, Y, or Z of these things to be included.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Jim for a lot of his thoughtful input. So that was all really, really helpful. So.
Yeah, I think one thing we learned is that no one's going to comment on anything unless there's a list up. So, there's something in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
So whether we load up a multiple choice, these are all the things that could happen, and then discuss everything from 100-story building to ripping everything down and building a park. That way we get, input on specifics, instead of asking people what would work, what would help you. That didn't really elicit any concrete anything. So I think the next step is we need to kind of push people with specifics in order to drive the conversation. Yep, Bill.
I think, thank you, Jim and Theo, for doing this. And I have to say that the whole idea, Jim, of the jumping off point is something that probably has been on my mind since the beginning. A couple of things that concern me is that we would put solutions out there. So I'm really glad to not see solutions. I love the potential incentives, and obviously we gathered that from our previous meetings. You nailed it with the restrictions considered. I mean, that's exactly sums up what we're looking for. I'm glad there's a short list, and there's a lot to talk about here. So that's really nice. If we look at one of my biggest concerns of risks on this, and I have two ideas. One risk is that a few people who speak up, whether they're business owners or from Wakefield, townsfolk, that a few will push us into a direction that isn't necessarily the best for where we need to go. So I think it would be important to also include some of the awesome information that was collected from Vision 2030. There's so much information there on the lake. that I wonder, and I don't know, Theo and Jim, if it's worth it to look through that bundle of information. Specifically, I think it was the first module, the first meeting that we had. I think it was really good to see like all the lake information come out. So I don't know, Theo and Jim, is that something that you think is worth having in here for, or having another separate section prepared saying, these are the 5 things that came out of the Vision 20 when a survey went out to, I think we should get some stats in there. 400 and something people responded to the survey, and this is the findings. I don't know if that all made sense, but I really like this. And I think we should be careful about a few people speaking up from the public, turning us into a direction that it might not be the one we should go in.
Yeah, I think, Jim, you were going to respond.
Yeah, I was going to say, Bill, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that the Vision 2030, frankly, separate discussion. I think there's a number of items in there that I read in there that were referring to things that I think that this board would be responsible for. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity to take that Vision 2030, talk about that data, incorporate it into this conversation. And frankly, I think that this is a great, starting point. But I think in addition, I think if we have our next meeting, the information that you pulled together, Bill, about the current zoning that's currently all around and the use of the table of uses, I think it's really important context to say, this is what we've heard from people. Here's the information that we've collated previously and presented at the last public forum about what the existing lake uses are, and then talk about some of these the short list of options, and then blend that Vision 2030 information into that presentation. I personally think if we're going to do only public forums, I think we're probably looking at like a 20-minute presentation by the planning board to really set the agenda and then drive discussion. And I think it's really important to be able to say, this is the information that we've collated on the zoning. Here's the things that are or are not allowable, just to make sure everyone's very clear. We're here to talk about changes to the zoning potential, one way or the other. Here's the feedback we got from the Vision 2030 process. And to make sure everyone's crystal clear, we're talking about underlying zoning. There's the possibility that the building owners can freeze it. Talking about all of those things and making it explicitly clear to the public when we're having this conversation, I think is very important. And then after that, 20-ish minute presentation, maybe even a little bit longer, then we would dive into public comment.
Right. I think thanks, Jim. I think this really parallels our master plan. So it's all going to weave together in a magical way, I hope.
I envision this being almost like the first in a number of items that are going to fall out of both Vision 2030 and the master plan, because those documents are really setting the vision, and then it's incumbent upon us to really implement it, and make sure the public comes along for the ride, because Vision 2030 and the master plan is a select number of people, and I don't think it can be construed as the whole town. So we got to give people the opportunity to continue to give feedback, but I think those should be at least the starting points.
Agreed.
Yeah, very, very much so. And Jim, that's a great suggestion about having a much more thorough presentation that really does help set a lot more context. We may not even need the 6 discussion questions that sort of fall from this and from that edition. Is there anything you'd change of this so far? Okay.
I personally think the content is good. I think it's just a matter of, the way, and again, this is just me coming off the top of my head. I think I would almost say like the overlying guiding principles, set the forth with the baseline of what the zoning currently entails.
Yeah.
Some of the feedback about the future, the future, and then you get into this draft questions that was on the page right here. I almost think there's almost like a section or two that's in between guiding principles and draft questions that would be incumbent upon us. And I think the first one of those sections. Bill's already basically put most of that information together. It's a matter of just feeding the Vision 2030 feedback in.
Mhm. Yeah, okay.
And Jim, to that point, it might be worth bringing some of the information that was gathered from before that we did present, maybe back to more of a generic statement quality, because I did pull stuff from the tables to really emphasize just and focus on the information that we were looking at. So it might be worth to go right back to the tables and just clip the exact bylaws.
Okay. Those are, yeah, really helpful. Anything else? I was wondering, getting really into the wording, do we want to change restrictions to just changes? Does restrictions seem too kind of onerous or negative? All right. Yeah. All right, we'll keep it.
Well, yeah, you may want to change that from restrictions to, at least at this level, the initial stage, to something that's a little more,
Items
I don't
considered.
know. Yeah,
Well, current or items considered, or current
Could be current consideration.
zoning bylaws, or
Yeah,
just maybe items considered is simple enough. That might be perfect.
Yeah.
Topics considered.
all right, cool. All right. Cool.
so when you get into, like, we're talking about height, is that, you're talking, is that just specifically a certain distance from the lake, or are you talking everything within this potential zone? How, you know, that's going to be one of the questions, depends, especially if we include a couple parcels that are a little bit further, you know, not adjacent to the lake, but maybe across the street. So how do you see that moving?
Yeah.
I personally think that it's one of those things where, you know, I could see it being one of those things where there's a setback from the lake associated with a corresponding height buffer, and then tapering back to regular, you know, intermediate zoning. At the same time, with that being said, I don't think I necessarily have a strong horse in that race, because I'd rather let the process play out. But I think it's an important distinction that you raise, and I think that's something that we would definitely need to be very clear with everyone as we're writing that.
Okay.
And maybe height is its own topic, because there seems to be a lot of elements to that.
Then you may want to take maximum height out of that and just say height of buildings.
Yeah.
So.
And frankly, if you're going to do that, just get rid of the lower adjacent taper. That's directionally more towards the solution, like an actual clarification.
So, right, so it does sound like maybe, well, anything else here? I mean, it sounds like we are kind of brainstorming the outline of a future presentation, which may or may not need the actual questions.
Well, view came up a lot of times in the discussion from the public and in our discussions as a board. So
Yeah,
I'm wondering if under topics considered, after height of buildings, it's also, I know we use the word preserving the view or creating views or maintaining. There were so many different words we used in there. When we tried to define them, it was difficult.
Yeah, I thought,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's actually, Theo, that sounds perfect.
Yeah.
Don't use view at all.
yeah, right.
I think we were stuck on that for a while.
I think the one thing I would caution is that preserving scenic quality, how does that translate to zoning? In
It's so
terms of,
subjective.
well, then that, and so I think, you know, with the building, right, is it's black or white. You're either restricting it to make a number up or not.
Right.
You know, setback, you're either having a setback or you don't, or what what is it? You know, the access to the public, you know, either you're requiring access or you're not. You know,
And
when
I
you
think,
preserve scenic quality, what does that translate in a zoning perspective?
right, I think this was the tough part, Jim, that we couldn't nail down and we just went in circles. So it was spoken about a few times. So I think it's worth having in there as a topic under consideration.
Yeah.
I like it at the end too.
The only thing I could think of as it relates to that is specifically like sight lines from, you know, I know there is zoning in specific places of the world where, you know, if you're standing at one spot, you have to maintain a sight line, something else. You know, maybe it's something along those lines, or maybe it's something along the lines of, you know, I know a lot of times we'll dictate, you know, you have to have specific plants to provide privacy. You know, this is obviously very different than that, but, you know, maybe it's a vegetation, you know, requirement. But those are the types of things that I could think of when you're talking about sight lines, besides the fact that you don't want a big hulking mass. You know, the massing restrictions, I feel like, is really where a lot of that is preserved.
We also talked about light pollution was one of the topics that came up. Maybe that is something that could go in there. It's like, no, please don't light the outside of your buildings completely so they glow around the lake at night.
That's a really astute point.
I think it was Matt's point. I can't take a lot of credit on that. I know it's a little bit of a pet peeve for Matt and me. I'm in there with that.
Perhaps it did come from me. I'll own up to that. Maybe it did come from me. Yes.
I think light pollution is a great one. You know, that's something that you can quantify, and it's something that you can specifically put in the zoning. You know, signage is another one. That probably would fall under visual pollution.
It's true, and that would be, I know this starts to cross over to some other boards jurisdictions, and the signing would be something that I don't think that did come up, but it would be horrible to have just like a big billboard across Vets Field at some point because somebody paid for it. I wonder if there are any restrictions in there or something. That's good.
Well, we do know that at one point, one of those video billboards was proposed up at the corner, you know, intersection of North Ave and 128, that really would have been visible from the lake.
Right.
So luckily that is further down, and I think there's a restriction about how far away each of these video signs can be. So that's good right now, but some of that stuff we can't control because the state highway through there. So, and another town that you can see. So there's only so much, as we know. You know, one thing that it's been a pet peeve of a lot of people is when Jordan's was built, they had specific requirements for lighting, and then that kind of got thrown out the window at the last moment. And now we literally can see the light bulb, you know, right into the light bulb. Whereas if we have lighting that's, you know, if they build, say well, we know they're going to build housing along the lake. We would hope that people, if they have lights on their balconies, that they, you know, light up the balcony and don't project out. So when you're looking across the lake, you don't see everyone's, side light glaring at them, where you light up, basically task lighting, you light up your area so you can see that, not that everyone sees your light. Again, I don't know if this is something we can put in there, but it could be an incentive by reducing lighting that's, that goes to something else. Again, I'm not sure how that would work out, but.
Excellent. Want me to throw that in here? All right. Do we want to talk about some of these questions, or we kind of what's next? And
I actually really like how these, I'm sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I'm sorry, the first question, we basically have been asking that.
right.
So we may want to rephrase that. Potential incentives could be like, and then list out some, instead of asking people, I think we need to prime the pump and put something out there so it gets people thinking about it. So maybe if we put something in there, such as, or
Yeah.
example, that might be helpful.
Okay.
To Matt's point, and Theo, I think it's a great place to start, is just to go right into those incentives, potential incentives.
Yeah.
Because that's where we leave off with our discussion, or
Right.
maybe that's the last part of our introduction or the presentation. And that first question goes right into those potential incentives while they're on topic.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you do have to list them here, because we just listed them up above.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just in referring to the incentives, potential incentives listed above.
Right. Yeah. I think this question is that's Vision 2030. So I think we could get rid of that.
I don't know. I kind of like that it's in there, because this is a chance for us to maybe share a few of the results of the Vision 2030 and see if anybody has any other ideas or they want to build on them.
So no bias here. Of course, there's, I'm from North Carolina. We all love Asheville. Anybody else want to throw some of your favorite places into the list?
I think this is a good mix of a list.
Yeah.
I think having Concord in there is really good. There's some similar downtowns to Wakefield. Concord doesn't have the lake. Melrose does have a lake, but it's not part of downtown. Owl Pond is a little further, is somewhat detached. That's our unique feature. That's part of it. Like, the lake is really a big part of what we have. So I think, I don't know, are there any other communities that we can think of that actually have a similar situation? I mean, Venice is a little an interesting choice, but I don't mind it. And there's, not that it works well as far as pedestrian walking, but there's a little part of Lake Winnipesaukee on the very southern end, Alton Bay. I don't know if you've ever been there, but Alton Bay has that lake right there, has a bandstand, has angled in parking and and different things going on, as well as parallel parking, but it's a big pedestrian driven path. So Alton Bay is probably the place. I think it's a really good case study for what we have, maybe to look at how that operates. Of course, we have events the same way Alton Bay has events. They have farmers markets, they have Old Town Week or Day, and so they have a lot of pedestrian traffic. Really good ice cream. It's more of that sitting, hanging out place. So it might be worth looking at how traffic moves, the scale, the views and all that. And it's, I don't know, that's the first place that comes to mind. On the opposite end of Winnipesaukee, only because it works really well, in a more deliberate way, Meredith has a really cool sculptural walking trail. So they have different artists, have different sculptures around, and they do change out. But Meredith, New Hampshire also has, I think, is it Meredith? It might be Center Harbor. I'd have to look. They're right next to each other. I think it's in Meredith, but they have a nice sculptural park that you can walk through, and it brings people around the lake. So there's different things that, different places, different public spaces that are used in different ways to draw people around. And the reason I'm bringing this up is between Alton Bay and Meredith, there are attractions that draw people around and through the lake and neighborhoods in a way that we don't really do. So it's something that hasn't come up, but it's how events and how, yeah, I guess events is a good word. How do events play into our planning, our thinking, our vision?
Yeah.
While you're typing, it's just, so there was a 5K last weekend. My son did his first 5K. He's in the middle school cross country team, so it's kind of interesting. But we, everything's up at Converse. It's just like in the worst, like little location parking, because that's the only place it really can be held. I mean, maybe there's a place to make that happen, or where's that going to happen when the development's there? So it's, I don't know. Quantipower Parkway was closed off to traffic when events like that happen. That's not going to be able to happen anymore.
Right.
Well, maybe it can, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah. I mean, so this is another Vision 2030 kind of a question. So we could. So, I mean, how about?
Just a quick, this message is to the whole board, this question. Will these questions be visible as we are having the meeting, or is it more that each one of us will have some questions to ask? Will they be part of a presentation that will be listed, or can we just get with the feeling and flow of what's happening and just ask these? I guess the other scenario is, are these published to the town website or sent out to the business owners and management before the meeting? I was wondering if that was something we should discuss.
We may want to put the outline on our website. I don't necessarily know if we're going to be notifying everyone every time we start the discussion up again. We obviously we'll have a notice in the paper when it does go to a public hearing, but for the forums, since this is an ongoing thing, it's kind of hard to, send a notice to everyone. So I think as long as we're open about it as possible and post this on our website so people can see, I think that would be helpful.
Right, and Matt, to Jim's point earlier about a presentation, it seems like a presentation with these questions should be up on our website, so those who are attending the meeting will have access to them earlier on, and maybe Susan or Erin, maybe we can have a couple paper copies of that presentation at Town Hall if anybody does stop by, for those who might not have access.
I think that's a strong suggestion. What I would advocate for is we take between now and the end of the year, try to refine this presentation, maybe have another one of these types of meetings, either at the at one of our December meetings and or early January, really make sure we drive consensus as it relates to this, and then target late January, early February for one of these public forums, and we commit to doing that right now, and then we just make sure that we do the work in advance of that, but then set the public forum for, I don't know, the first meeting in February, assuming that we don't have any other business then, and then we're committing ourselves to doing the work to getting this published by the end of this year. And we meet as a board, we all nod our heads, yes, this is the presentation we want to give. And then we can allocate who has to do what in terms of getting ready, that presentation ready right now. And then we all have our homework to do. We do it. And then we have, I think that means so we have a process such that we can have a really quality public forum, and maybe even 2 in February, March. And then that gets us ready for, to be able to sit down and actually do our work in advance of Springtown meeting. I think it goes without saying at this point, but I think it's incumbent upon us to really try to lay out a framework such that if we're going to do this, we can set ourselves up for success between now and Springtown meeting.
I think
That sounds like a plan, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Mhm.
So do you want to have like another working group, or how do you envision this? We all going to mark up individually, or how do we proceed, I guess, is the.
Yeah, I mean, what I would advocate to do is, I think, and tell me if anyone disagrees. I think we're all kind of rowing in the same direction as it relates to how to set this up. I think what makes sense is, like I'd raise my hand. I'll scrub through Vision 2030 and try to pull out that, that here's what the Vision 2030 said about this project. If there's other, parts of this presentation other people want to pull together and be responsible for, or we identified kind of 4 sections, right? The section where we were going to really set out the vision and what the feedback we've gotten to date, the kind of the overview of the current level of zoning, the Vision 2030 feedback overall, and then kind of our framing the discussion, I think, with some of these questions out right here. I think it makes sense where if we allocate who's responsible, who's on first for each one of those items, we have another working session where we kind of take all of that information and collate it together. And then we're we all nod our heads, say, yes, we agree. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think that we could probably allocate who's responsible for what right now, between now and, our like December 14th planning board meeting. We all go ahead, do our items. Then we come back, we make sure the presentation is all tuned up, and then we identify, I don't know, maybe the January 25th and like February 8th. We set 2 public forums right now. And then from there, after those 2 public forums that we have the ability, we're not doing any public forums during the holidays. We're just doing our own internal stuff. and then we give everyone notice right now, and then after we have 2 public forums, late January, early February, or we can kick that out another 2 weeks if we need to. Then between then and May, we'll have plenty of time.
So you're thinking you definitely want to have something for spring town meeting? Some kind of zoning change?
I mean, unless people feel differently, if we come at the public forums and we say, nope, everyone agrees that we should not change anything, then maybe, if we think that's the appropriate, I think that we need to set ourselves up as if we're going to have a change for sure. And then if we decide at a later date that it's not necessary, then I think that we can make that pivot then. But I think we have to proceed with the process such that we know we're going to make a change or propose a change.
Okay.
I don't want to speak for the whole board. That's how I see it.
I think it's I think it's actually very helpful to set that as the potential goal for it, right? That's an outcome, and that outcome may be realized in May. It may get further refined as and so I don't think there's any harm with trying to set that schedule, because that really does help us keep things moving. And obviously we're going to adapt it as other definitive plans come up or other things come before us, and it might actually help some of the master planning kind of maybe agenda setting. I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's fully baked. So
All right. I know, so I'm going to be talking about this in our next agenda item, but the workshops that are coming up, there are some specifically related to what we're talking about here. So obviously we're going to want to make sure that some, if not all of us, maybe go through that course just to make sure that we have a good handle on it. So, but that's November 18th, so it's not that far away. So basically this would fit into our early December meeting. And again, I don't even know if we're going to have an end of December meeting. We'll see how it goes. So we're not sure. I don't know if we're sure we're going to have another meeting this month. We're going to talk about that later too. So potentially we might have 2 meetings between now and next year. So there's a lot of work just to get set up for a public forum at the end of January or the beginning of February. That's not many meetings away. So I just wanted to put that up there. So
I can't agree more. I think that you're right, that there's definitely work here to be done and there's not a lot of meetings. With that being said, I think that I think there's a path, is the way I'd put it. I think if, we're definitely going to have the meeting December 14th, in mid-December. And I think that if we do our homework between now and then, I think that there's a pathway where we can get to that working session and be ready to go in early January. And maybe we give ourselves that first January meeting as a buffer to finalize it. In terms of what you were talking about with those other trainings, I'm in full agreement. I think as many of us should go to those as possible.
So, should I stop sharing my screen? And do we want to try to divvy up some of these sections, at least in
Yeah, we can try to give action items to specific people, just so we all don't think someone else is working on that.
Yeah.
So,
I'd like to take the graphics, please. So whatever that entails as far as the current presentation that we've used with the locations around the lake, I think they could be improved graphically. I'd also like to pull together, maybe be responsible for pulling together the whole slideshow together with all the pieces, just only because it's what I do. And I don't mind having help doing that, but I'd like to take what we already have and pull it into a program that allows us to update things easier.
That's
fine
awesome.
with me.
Yeah.
Bill, if it's okay, then in that case, what I could do is I can scrub through Vision 2030 and send you kind of the high level feedback in, if not necessarily presentable, but semi-presentable format, such that you can take it and, you know, take it to across the finish line and try to make it more of a whole with the rest of the presentation.
Right, and I could just share the draft with the board, and we could either have at our next meeting a discussion on what we can update or change, or I can solicit changes individually.
That's great. I had a third element being, I wrote frame discussion. Is that needed? Or there, Jim, did you have other components? Did I miss?
So I think that the generalized breakdown was the vision of the lake, which I think we have the content in the document that you were just sharing. So I think it's a matter of formatting that. It's the discussing what the underlying zoning currently is. So
Yeah.
I don't know, Bill, does that need a tune up of what we have right now, or do you have what you need to take that and put it into a presentable form?
I think that's enough to get it all organized and pulled together. Just finding the right place for the graphics and figuring out where that all goes. Thinking that the presentation, the introduction that's already here is great. I think pulling in the graphics for that big middle part, and then adding in those questions as they go along with some Vision 2030 info is what I was thinking. It's, you know, keeping it to like 4 or 5 slides, nothing that big, more to help us with talking points, to keep us on track, and to also provide the public with something as a pre-read. So when they do attend the meeting, it's not the first time they're looking at it.
And then the last thing, Theo, I had is the I was proposed restrictions, but maybe items to consider, and just,
Yeah.
outlining each one of those. So, maybe what we do is we take, some sort of peer, I don't know, kind of explaining what each one of those actually looks like, in a graphical form.
Yeah, I'm good on text. I'm bad on visuals. So the
So,
planner versus architect.
Jim, are you thinking like show a map of what's existing now, and if it were, say, 50 feet back, what the changes would be, or what is it that you see coming out of this?
Yeah, I see. When we're talking about potential items that we might consider, it's so like one of the items is width of building, right? Just kind of explaining what that is and showing what that may look like in the zoning code from a practical perspective. I'm trying to think in terms of my mind's eye. I think it's kind of odd. You show a building, you say you can't be wider than this in order to make it so you're not breaking, having big walls of building. But show that kind of graphically, just from a high level, so people, you're not getting too wordy about it. Same thing with like maximum height of building. You show grade and you show the top of the building. You say this would be something that we could restrict or not. to your point, maybe a map of a lake and you take a 50-foot-ish buffer and you show it around saying you can't build here, things of that nature, just so you graphically can tick through each one of them quickly.
So I don't even know what the current restriction is from building from the lake is anyways. So are we potentially being redundant by saying you can't build within 50 feet of the lake if you already can't build within 50 feet of the lake? I'm not positive on that. So
Right.
we may want
And
to
it's
check
different
that.
depending on what use group.
And what the, I know the Concom has jurisdiction, but I don't think specifically they have a setback. I'm not sure. So that's something we may want to look into.
Could
I'm
we
happy to-
or could we organize like a meeting with them or present them this material in advance to get their input and insight prior to the having the public forums? Getting Conservation Commission's input. Would that be, do we think that that would be helpful or?
Well, we may want to tie this in with the request we had with potentially helping them rewrite their rules and regulations. So we may, we could potentially have a joint meeting where we could cover both topics at once, which, so that might be a good thing. And getting them on board about what would be beneficial for the lake with development. So type of plantings around the lake. Do they want to see green grass and people fertilizing it, or do they want to have some kind of natural buffer? That would be good to know. So when this gets rolled out, that what the best practices are for protection of the lake is actually built into it. So yeah, that's a good idea.
And I'm a huge proponent of combining meetings, so I'm game.
Okay. Again, that was an item we're going to talk about a little later, but we can roll that into potentially having a joint meeting or at least a working group with some of their members to work through these items. So, all right. All right, so do we have action items and directions sufficiently established now, or are we still looking for items that need to be done? I can tell you right now that I am pretty swamped, so I'm not gonna be able to dedicate a whole bunch of time. I can dedicate some, but I am literally working 12 hours a day, so I don't know how much more I could, with the normal stuff going on, add to this. But
Lost you,
if there's
Matt.
something specifically
I don't know if
that,
anybody else can, I
you know,
can't hear
you
them.
can tell me, happy to help. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of be an assistant to Jim or Bill. And it may make sense, Matt, for you just to be sort of the editor, or let us assemble the first draft or something like that. So,
Okay.
I think what I heard is that Bill volunteered to be kind of the hub for this in terms of getting the graphics together. And, I think Theo and I can work on being the spoke and giving him the text in terms of trying to get that put together.
Right. Sorry, I lost a little bit of my connection there when Matt was speaking. I think I'm all back and not glitching. But I think I heard enough. Yes, Jim, I am on board for that.
And, you know, and Megan gets a lot of credit for helping get all this started too. All right, I appreciate this discussion. I think this is really helpful. So I appreciate everyone for moving it forward.
All right, so when do you want this? Well, you think in our first meeting in December, we can have another discussion about this? We will have moved along enough to continue this discussion, or are you thinking if we have another meeting this month, which obviously would be 2 weeks, so.
I think I would advocate for us to just go to the December 14th meeting. One, we can provide ample notice very easily. And two, between now and then, you know, especially with some of the holidays coming up, I think it would make a lot of sense for the coordination of this to take our time getting that ready and then gearing up for end of the year to go hard as it relates to pushing print on it.
Okay. All right, so let's we'll set a meeting agenda item of continued discussion of how we want to call this. Want to continue to just call it what we've been doing, which is potential future lake business overlay district or potential zoning around the lake. I don't know how we want to brand this or call it. So
Maybe
I'd
Susan
advocate
can
just to
help.
maintain.
okay, so we'll just carry the same. Susan, if you carry the same item over and put it on for December 14th, that would be good. All right, so let's move on to item 4, items not anticipated. So we've got a couple things. I know we all got a package from the ZBA this past week or the week before. Have people reviewed that, and do they have any comments on that at all? I'm going to bring this up on my screen just so people can see what's
Matt, I'm sorry, we're talking about 356 Lowell Street, correct?
correct.
So
Yeah,
the motor fuel outlet, right?
yes.
Okay.
So can you guys see that on my screen? So, yeah, this is a ZBA item that was referred to our board and other boards for 356 Lowell Street. That is, if you look down here, this is the gas station that is at the corner of Lowell and Vernon Street and abuts basically Dolbear School on 2 sides. So what they are proposing to do is to remove the existing building that's there and basically add a new larger building with a drive-through around the back. So I looked at this and I just see a lot of potential problems right now with traffic. Specifically, traffic down there is a mess as it is with the school. And there's already a lot of issues with people parking everywhere and kids walking back and forth, especially at pickup time. We all know, all of us that have kids at least, that you need to park your car and then walk and pick up your child somewhere. There's no drive up and pick up. So it gets very busy down there in the afternoons. It's very busy in the morning. So adding a drive-through lane where people are presumably coming to pick up coffee and they aren't properly caffeinated pulling in here, and as they're pulling out, they still aren't properly caffeinated, but they're filling with their coffee now, and you're pulling out across sidewalks into a busy intersection. So I just see that this is not a good fit for this area. So I don't know if anyone else has any opinions on this.
Yeah, I was in agreement with you, Matt. I even like looked right at like the traffic patterns for having like the output, right? We're kind of reversing the drive-through, if you will, but there's still the exit from the school on Vernon Street on the opposite side that would propose significant problems. So even suggesting a reverse of the drive-through seems to be problematic with children and traffic. So
Yeah, I don't know if the proponent of this has a plan on what type of people they're trying to capture. If it's people coming off the highway to come through here and then jump back on the highway, or townspeople, or what. So
I think one of the things that was in the packet was that there was in one of the, I think it was the 2016 or maybe the 2003 version of this, is that there was actually a condition set forth by the ZBA such that they could not be advertising to I-95, some signage restrictions. I think that might be something that would be appropriate for this specific application. I do understand that there's the concern as it relates to some of the traffic. I think that one of the things that did appear to me is if it was a benefit compared to the current as-built condition was the elimination of the curb cut to the southeast corner. Right now there's 4 curb cuts. One of them that's closer to the intersection would be eliminated in this configuration. In my mind, reading the traffic report, the biggest issue here as it relates to some of the traffic being backed up is as it relates to the signal, the light at the signal, or the light at the intersection. Currently, the video monitoring does not work. But if it was to be restored, it could bring the level of service back to actually better than the current condition that's appeared in the documentation. That to me seemed like it was the biggest driver as it relates to trying to relieve some of the traffic. Just looking at the numbers in the traffic report.
all right. One thing I know the entity that wants to purchase this has their own model for how they envision this going, but there's really no, I don't think there's any restrictions that say they wanted to switch vendors for their coffee and they switched to another national chain, that potentially you're going to have the same backup issues that you have in the junction with the Dunkin' Donuts down there. So this, and I counted, has one more car length than what the junction has right now. And I don't know if anyone has driven down there during the morning, but basically traffic is backed up all over the place, people trying to pull in there. And I know they have signage when you pull out of the drive-through, you're supposed to make a right. People don't do that, and it's just a mess. So I just see that, the queuing for this is not enough to get people in off of the sidewalk and off of the street. So I don't know how you can correct something like this. It's basically human nature. If people want coffee, they're going to go for it. So, and one thing we've learned during the pandemic is that people like drive-throughs more than ever. So. So I guess where I'm leading to this is, do we want to send a letter to the ZBA with any recommendations at all for this? I don't know how people feel about it. I'm leaning towards, saying that I don't see this as a good fit for this area with the adjacent school and the current traffic conditions. But that's my opinion. I guess we need input from others.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I don't know if we can say, right, it's not a fit for a drive-through situation is my feelings. Not just car traffic, right? But my big concern is, Matt, as you mentioned, is foot traffic, especially of the children, right, near the school and the implications there. And, with cars backed up, kids trying to walk through with their parents, someone doesn't see something, right? It could cause some significant problematic concerns. And so I don't know how we could word it, but my concern would be not just car traffic, but also foot traffic in relation to the school. And I just don't see a drive-through as a good situation in this area at all.
Yeah, and one thing, if you limit the parking, then you only have so much. The property owner has a right to do whatever they want here. That's fine. If they want to build a new gas station and convenience store, that's up to them. I would just prefer that it not have a drive-through, because I think that's going to be an issue. So it would turn into basically they have more parking here than Cumberland Farms would have. So Cumberland Farms seems to be pretty busy, and they get flow through. So I would like to see this, move forward, but without the drive-through is what I'm leaning towards.
Matt, after going through and making some comments, and Jim brought up a good point about what is in the past permits and how they were still awarded or granted the special permit, even with the comments. So I guess my question is, with what was granted before, nothing matters from that. Is that correct? Meaning the special permits that were granted before and existing whatever, that this is all brand new now. They're going for their own special permit through the ZBA, correct?
That's what I believe, yes.
Same here. I guess that's the biggest first question I had is, with what was in the past and what was approved, they still have to go through the special permit approval. So with that, I am most concerned about pedestrians moving through here. I'm not so concerned about the curb cuts and the traffic and everything. I am solely concerned about people walking around on the sidewalk, and you mentioned the school. It's the most important. I know this is a corner lot, which makes it extra difficult, I think, to have a drive-through. I was thinking about other places that would be on a corner that have a drive-through. And honestly, I can't think of too many. And I'm wondering if the Dunkin' Donuts at the junction is not on the corner because of that, but is pushed back further down Main Street because they couldn't access Nahant Street and Main Street in a safe way. Right? Because I think Dunkin' Donuts owns that parking lot that is on the Nahant Street side.
Well, one of the rationales for that is that they wanted to keep the Dunkin' Donuts open while they were building the Dunkin' Donuts. So,
okay.
And I'm specifically familiar with that because I worked on the design on that. I hate to say.
Okay.
So
I thought that, and when I was in the other day, I actually pulled into the parking lot off in Nahant Street. I'm thinking, how does this really work? Was that the concept where it's like, no, they can't really have a drive-through because it's on the corner? And then driving around, I kept noticing it's like nobody really has drive-throughs that are on corners. And I'm wondering if that's part of the reason, because of the vehicular traffic going in as a U and coming back out versus these extra curb cuts and pedestrians. I mean, I don't know how someone is going to walk from that little island on Vernon Street and make it across what I measured off to be like more like about 45 feet of distance at a corner to make it to the crosswalk. I don't see that as a safe passage at all.
Yeah. And I understand the no signage on the highway, but truthfully, that was a long time ago. Signage doesn't matter. It's all in your phone now and on your GPS. And so I think they'll happily not put any signage up on the highway because that's an extra cost for them, but they will still market it. So people will still know about it. People can still find it. So to me, that's not much of a consolation prize, that they're not potentially not going to put a sign on the highway and draw people off the highway, but people will still find it. So, but I'm sure they will use that.
Yeah, I'm glad the point came up about the drive-through. I wasn't focused on that as much as eliminating that curb cut that I was mentioning for on Vernon Street side, closer to the Lowell Street intersection.
Yeah, and Bill, to your point, why there are no drive-throughs on corners mostly, especially when they're signal controlled, is that the signal basically would dictate their traffic flow on the lot. So that's why most places try to avoid that.
I never thought of that as a design concept until this came up, and I'm like, wow, there's so many problems with having a drive-through or this type of like on a corner.
Yeah. And the company I work for now, we're doing a lot of drive-throughs for different chains. And yeah, they're basically pulling them. If people have to drive another few minutes through a parking, a shopping mall or something to get there, people are willing to do that. They don't want to get out of their car. They will drive another 5 minutes in order to not get out of their car. So they're actually moving these further into shopping center parking lots so they can queue people up. For them, it's taking their order and giving them their product and moving them along. If they have to drive 5 minutes extra and sit in someone else's light, that's fine with them. They've already done their job. So
understood.
But obviously in Wakefield and with conditions we have here, this is what you're left with.
So what do we want to write to the ZBA? Do we want to eliminate the drive-through or mention why? Or do we want to also mention the curb cut that's closer to the intersection?
I would, for me, the big thing would be the drive-through, is to say that it's problematic with traffic flow and pedestrian activity, especially with school kids crossing back and forth.
Right.
So that's what I would be leaning towards. I think you're going to need to have a larger curb cut at one point in order to get fuel delivery in here. So you're going to have at least a third one and potentially a larger one to get trucks in there. So
yeah, and one of the design they showed where like how the truck would kind of pull in and pull out.
Which is, I don't know if I have that here.
Let me look at my.
I think the rationale for where it's located currently is that there's existing underground storage tanks as it relates to, they're not relocating that infrastructure. So they're maintaining the curb cut as currently constituted. That one that you're questioning, Bill, as well as the one up the one to the farther to the west on Lowell Street.
It's on, oh God, truck turn plan is what it's called.
Yeah, I
Um,
only scanned a couple of the
Okay.
plans. Because unfortunately, again, we did not get this delivered digitally. We got hard copies, so, but.
Yeah.
That fact is not lost to any of us here, so.
I didn't even see the truck turn plan. It's way at the end. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I went right to the elevations to see what it looked like. That's right. They are using that longer close on Vernon Street, closer to the intersection.
All right, so,
If I'm being honest, the thing when I review this documentation that I think is the biggest thing that I would like to see that we recommend is specifically as it relates to that traffic light. You know, if the traffic report is really is correct, then even if nothing were to change in this intersection, the level of service going in and out, I believe it's the southbound approach, if I recall, is going to significantly degrade based on the existing increase in traffic and some of the MBTA infrastructure that's going in. Whereas even if you were to execute this project and you made it so that traffic light had the proper signaling infrastructure with the timing and the video sensing, it indicated that the level of service is going to be increased to, better than the current condition. In my mind, that seems to be the most reason, one of the biggest things. I don't know if we necessarily can require them to do anything about that because that's town infrastructure, but that's the thing I'd be interested if I was sitting in the ZBA in terms of talking with engineering and DPW as it relates to what would it cost to get that fixed, and is that a condition of financial support as it relates to town infrastructure to help alleviate some of the traffic burden in this adjacent area.
well, that kind of gets me going on another issue in this town is that we have a lot of defective traffic detection in this town. There's a number of intersections that they don't work properly. That is one of them. It had been working, it failed, and we never fixed it. Same with Greenwood, that intersection doesn't work properly. The intersection in the square, there's a 20-second delay for southbound traffic to take a left, whether there's one car there or 20 cars there. And on a Saturday, you see how far coming north on Main Street gets. So we shouldn't have to have new development in order to fix what we have because we're not fixing it on our own. So to me, and I know they're using that as a justification, oh, we'll fix that. It's like, well, what if we just fixed it before they moved in? They wouldn't have that justification, and therefore, it's one of the things that happened in a lot around here is that properties get degraded long enough where the benefit is, oh, we can fix this neglected property because the property owner let it go so long. And the only way we can do that is if we rip it all down and build something new. I'm sick of that mentality that we have here. So we need to fix what we have before we start building other stuff that, we want to rebuild downtown. But yet, are we going to, once we rebuild it, are we going to maintain it? Or are we going to let the lights break and wait for someone else to come in and fix it? So that just kind of gets me going that we can't fix what we have. And every single day, people that have to wait at these lights are wasting fuel, wasting time, and the town doesn't seem to care about that. So sorry, Jim, to go off on that, but that has really pissed me off. And my mother lives over there. I go over there so often. There's no reason that I have to sit at a light when nobody's there. But yet Every morning when I go over, I'm sitting at that light, waiting for nobody, for the thing to turn green for me to go at the proper cycle. So. Again, I know they're going to use this as a rationale for, the benefit that they're going to give to the town is they're going to fix something that we haven't fixed on our own, but that shouldn't come into play.
Can't I think to buttress your point, Matt, isn't this just going to generate even more traffic that the intersection can't handle, even if it were fixed? I think would be some of the, maybe that would help.
Correct. That, yeah, I mean, even with a proper, a proper detection system there, you're going to have to reconfigure the entire thing for people coming out of a drive-through. And do you restrict them from just, from turning left? So they have to go right. So you're sending all these people past the school? Or do you let them turn left and they sit in the intersection and block the intersection while they're waiting for the light to change? So again, it's just a problematic area to be putting this in. So that's why, to me specifically, the drive-through is the issue here. And the cars coming out where they're going to go, the queuing on the way in and the exiting where they're going to go. We see that right now with Dunkin' Donuts in the junction. So no matter how much signage and, the way you try to force people to go, it doesn't work.
Just to be clear, Theo, just the way you specifically were asking in terms of what the traffic report said, if there, regardless of any of the scenarios, if the light was properly working, the timing of it, the level of service would be at least the level of service C, which is better than any of the existing level of services, except for I think 2 approaches under all conditions. So really that's why, in my opinion, the light getting fixed, and Matt, I totally hear you as it relates, we should be fixing it anyway, but the timer not working is really the main driver of the non-performance of the intersection, at least associated with this report.
So I guess we're at the point, do we, from the board, do we want to send a letter to the ZBA with anything or not? To me, I'm leaning, I would like to send a letter saying at least the drive-through is going to be problematic with traffic queuing and pedestrian traffic.
I agree. I think a letter should be sent. I think it needs to be worded in a way that we are concerned about what you just mentioned, Matt. Then this is for their meeting on the 17th or 18th. When's their meeting?
They want comments back by the 17th, I believe.
I'm just quickly looking at a calendar. So they must be meeting on the 17th, which is a Wednesday.
It's the next scheduled meeting for the petition, according to the letter sent to us.
All right, how do Theo and Jim, how do you feel about the board sending a letter?
Yeah, I'm certainly supportive. Yeah, and certainly, yeah, for all the reasons cited.
I would just advocate that if we're going to send a letter, specifically as it relates to the pedestrian and vehicle traffic, I think that we should just make, I personally think we should highlight that the signal's got to be part of any solution. The signal upgrade, because as I said, it's just, to me, it's, from reading the report, it seems like that's clearly the biggest thing that would be a way to mitigate, even if nothing happens in terms of the existing, or it needs to get fixed. So if they're going to be doing anything with this project, even if they remove the drive-through, I think still getting the signal is an important thing to recommend the ZBA consider as part of this project.
All right, we can add that. Obviously, I'd rather see it get fixed, you know, immediately. If we have items that are supposed to work in this town, then when they break, we shouldn't just ignore them. We should, you know, if it costs money to fix it, then that's the cost of the infrastructure that we put in that we need to maintain. So, and I hope that if for some reason this project doesn't go through, that means this, you know, this intersection never gets fixed because no one else paid for it. That is not the proper way to go. So maybe we should put in there that, you know, this and other intersections really need to be looked at immediately. I don't know. So I'm willing to throw together an outline or wording on this. I think, Theo, you are technically our secretary. You would be writing something like this.
No, it's me.
Oh, it's you. Oh, even better. So Megan,
Yeah.
how do you feel about?
I don't know why I just volunteered myself, but I think I just
No,
did.
you just pointed out what I neglected to remember. So do you want to put something together? I know Bill has done one in the past for a couple of projects. We could probably just basically take that. We're only talking of, you know, a paragraph at the most. We're not talking a novel.
Correct.
I'm
Yes,
updating
I
it
have-
right now, and I'll send it to, I will send one of the previous letters to Megan with the same format and information.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I have one on file from one of our previous letters, but thank you, Bill, for sending it to the top of my inbox. And yes, Matt, I will draft a response.
All right. And then either you or myself will touch base with the other members, not obviously together individually, and just make sure that we're fine with the text of this before it gets sent out.
Okay, that works for
That-
me.
Sound okay to everyone, just so you see what's going out?
I think that makes sense. We don't have to take a vote for this, right?
No,
Okay.
we're just, it's correspondence from our board, so I don't believe we need to take a vote. We really don't have the letter written completely yet, but so we know the gist of it. All right. The other items we got were basically decisions that get filed. I don't know why they're printed out and sent to us. They're going to be at the registry of deeds, but that's something we get. One thing, if you read through these decisions, you always see that they refer to plans, but yet no one ever sees the plans. I would prefer, as this board does, if there's a plan that's referred to, that at least either the entire plan is on file at the registry of deeds, or at least there's a document filed, which is an image of the plan, so you know what you're looking at. Unfortunately, with the ZBA, you have to go to the building inspector and find that plan after the fact. So, but that's how they run their board, so. All right. Was there anything else in the ZBA package anyone else had comments on? No? Okay. One of the other things I wanted to discuss, and I briefly touched on this, was revisions of our rules and regulations. I would like to get started working on that. I believe, and I'm going to check with Tom Mullen, I believe the process is we just need to post this on our agenda. We can discuss it. And then I believe I need to check. We may need to have a public hearing just so we can take input. And then once we've done that and voted, we can approve those and it moves forward. So, but I'm going to double check on that. And I'm going to also double check on the process for the conservation, because they, at our last meeting, Jim asked if we'd be willing to help them out. So if we could potentially, do this in concert, that would be good. So I'll check with town council, Tom Mullen, and see what the exact process is. And then perhaps we can put this on the agenda for a future meeting. I'm not sure if it's going to be our next meeting or the one in December, but that's what I'm looking at for that. I'd like to start with the A&R plans, and specifically, I'm just trying to, right now, we already require digital versions of everything, but we also have in there paper copies are still required. I'd like to put in potentially that's optional. So, because I do know we print out a lot of paper that never ever gets looked at, but it's because it's required. So, and then I would like to, when we do get to the subdivision rules and regulations, also put in there digitally that all copies come to us. I believe we already have that, but I don't know if it's actually in our rules and regs that we should do that. Plus, there are other things we can go through. Previously, when we had board members that have been on for a while, we used to have a book that was published, rules and regulations with amendments. And you would have to, if you're going to do a subdivision time, you would have to go get that book and read through it. And those are what everyone's looking at, the same thing. They've since gone to E-code, where basically they took that book, everything was typed in. There are a number of items that were not entered correctly, and there's some conflicts between what was last published in a book and what's online. The former town planner went through and created a document that highlighted all of those issues. And I have that. I'd like to go through that at some point. I want to send that to everyone so you can see what needs to be updated. I'd like to go through and make sure when we do redo our rules and regulations that we address all those items and make sure that everything gets carried through properly. So,
quick question, just
Yep.
on that. What's the reason for your priority? Do you see a need for A&R plans over subdivision, or?
I'm looking at A&Rs first because it should be quick and easy. We basically had a revision of the A&Rs a little over a year ago.
Yep.
So it would be a tweaking of that. So it should be pretty straightforward. I think what we have is working out pretty good right now. So that's why I would go with the A&Rs, because we could get that knocked out pretty quickly. The subdivision rules and regulations are going to take a while. We need to work with the DPW because there are a number of items in there that are always asked for on waivers. Some of them are pipe sizes and things like that. We need to coordinate with DPW. So that's going to be a long process.
Right, and I think engineering too, just to find out how that, when you say DPW, do you also put engineering under there, or do you have them as a separate piece?
It's DPW engineering, yes, it's the same, so, yeah. All right. Aaron sent out the CPTC workshop schedule. I think everyone got that. So I know I am planning on myself doing, I still don't have that schedule up here. I was gonna, all right, must have got out of that website. No, here it is. So I'm planning on doing the November 17th, adopting and revising rules and regulations. And I was also looking at doing the drafting zoning amendments, which happens to be the 18th. So 2 nights in a row. I'm definitely going to be doing those. This is obviously, it's optional if people want to do it on their own, but that's what I'm planning on doing. So
I was thinking of doing the one on the 18th as well, Matt. Is it worth it for both of us to do it, or do you want to split, or is it so important that you want to also attend in person? Or via Zoom?
I'm definitely going to do it myself.
Okay.
So
And they're all webinars, Bill.
Yeah, I know it's in person, meaning through the webinar.
yeah. So I mean, might be good if everyone does it, but it's up to each person. So it just makes you a better town planner the more information you have. So
Agreed.
that's what I'm doing. So, all right. And then the last item for me, I know I've seemed like I've been talking all night, is the meeting schedule. So I know at our last meeting, we kind of decided to wait to see if we're going to have our next scheduled meeting is the 23rd. Do we want to continue with that meeting or wait for a game time decision? If nothing's going on, we can cancel at the last minute. Anyone have any strong feelings either way?
I'd go for game time decision.
Okay.
If something comes up, I'd like to entertain it, and an A&R might come up or something that we can look at. If it doesn't, then we don't need to meet.
Okay. We can be a little less winded at our next meeting and hopefully get out of there pretty quickly. So, and then the meeting after that is December 14th. I know we're going to have a lot of items on that. So, and then we'll wait until December to decide on our second meeting in December, which would be, let's see, the 28th. So that's school vacation week for kids that have, for kids and parents that, so, but we can wait on that. So, all right, that's all I have. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add to the items not anticipated.
Stark Avenue comes back on December 14th. That's right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. All right. Everyone all set with items not anticipated?
Yeah, Matt, I was going to speak up about the events that are coming up and mention that I want to go to the one on the 18th. So that's all I had to share. I mean, I was going to bring up town meeting. I thought it was an interesting discussion about the Vogue. And one comment that came up, if you do want to watch any part of town meeting, I thought the one of the commissioners, I can't remember her exact title, but Jennifer from the Gas and Light gave an excellent, like, quick summary of sustainability and the Vogue and how important that would be for the new construction.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they already have all their plans set and it's hard to change at this point. So since they have a construction manager in there, I don't know how that would work out.
Right. Well, the mention was more about, well, if this is a school with the people that are attending the school to really push natural resources and how efficiency and sustainability is driven, what about the fuel to the new spaces? Meaning, is it natural gas versus electricity? And if, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but I think it was like a 30-70, meaning 30% electrical, 70% natural gas, if there was some way that could flip. I was, yeah, kind of listening and thinking at the same time. So I think going back, if there was any part of town meeting I found really interesting, that really helped me think about, oh, our master plan, this is something else that another person that we might want to speak to or understand more about, is Jennifer from the Gas and Light.
All right. Erin, if you're still there, I don't know if you have anything you want to bring up at this point. All right. Jim? you have-
One thing, obviously the Wakefield 2030 vision is I don't know if the finals come out, but the draft was available at town meeting. One of the things kind of going, I haven't gone all the way through it yet, but there are a number of references to items that are included in the Wakefield 2030 that in my mind look like they directly would be the responsibility of this board to implement or choose not to. I just want to highlight that, there was a number of references to, I think, like zoning changes, or, I believe that the words were used were permissive zoning as it relates to specific elements. I just want to highlight that to folks, as I said, I'm still going through it. I don't think it's even the finals out yet, but something to put on people's radar in terms of something that we may need to review and address at a future date.
All right. I know from the housing forum, one of the things that came up a lot was the average median income of town, and the threshold in order to get an affordable unit. Right now it's 80%. We may want to see about revising that to 60% or less. I don't know what the ramifications are for doing that. If people, make, if it costs more for the developer, or it's just a fewer amount of people are qualified for these units, I'm not sure. So that's something we should look at, and something we may want to consider initiating from the board, from our planning board, for definitely for spring, because we're going to have a lot of units coming online soon, and I think we should just look at that factor there. So.
Hey, Matt, I just want to mention Erin had to jump off, so.
Okay. All right. If no one has anything else, I'm going to move to item number 5. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Second.
All right. We'll call that, we're going to give that to Theo. So
Woohoo.
motion made by Bill, seconded by Theo. Roll call vote, Jim Hogan,
Yep.
Megan Menasali,
Yes.
Theo Knoll,
Yes.
Bill Spalding,
Yes.
and myself, yes. So, all right, thank you, everyone.